All right, so I'm sure a few more people will be joining as this call goes on. But first of all, thank you guys so much for all coming and joining us today. I know that joining Zoom meetings takes quite a commitment, especially when you have endless numbers of Zoom meetings that you can join. We're hopeful that today's community showcase will be a little bit different for everyone and a fun experience. Just to tell you a little bit about the center, this is our website, and you're welcome to check us out. We are very grateful for funding from the USC Office of Research, from the Collaboration Fund. In terms of our program for today, I'm excited that we have 5 pretty short, quick, and to the point talks about 5 different exciting AR and VR applications for sensory motor rehabilitation. So these will be coming up. I'm gonna we've re-recorded them to make sure everything was smooth and seamless for you all. But as you're listening to the talks, please feel free to put notes or questions or comments in the chat. And I think all of the speakers are here, so they'll be monitoring those and can either respond. And then afterwards, the talks take about 40 minutes. After that, we'll do a live Q&A. So like I said, all the speakers are here so they can answer questions. We can have dialogue and discussion. And then afterwards, one of the things that we thought and hoped would be the most interesting is that you can actually try out demos. So in the days when we could gather in large groups of people, we would usually do this as a series of talks followed by demos set up in a separate room, and you would try on our VR applications and things like that. In this case, since that's not possible, we've mailed out these VR headsets. So if you didn't get one, you can let us know, and we still have some so we can mail them out. But it looks like this. And basically, if you've never worked with them before, you just open it up, you flip it over, you load the YouTube playlist that we sent out on your smartphone. Let me see if I can do it like this. So you'll put the YouTube playlist there, and then you put it in this little device, and you have your very own at-home VR demo set. So the quality of graphics, of course, is not going to be as great as any sort of tethered system, but it should give you an idea of what the different environments we're talking about look like. We've also loaded on that YouTube playlist a series of other like widely available 360 videos that we thought you might find interesting. So things like exploring space in 360, nature, meditations, who doesn't need a little bit of peace and quiet these days, among other things. So that's all there. And then at the end of the showcase, we'll also be uploading all the talk videos there. So you can go back and refer to them as well. Okay, so, and we also, I forgot to mention, we also, in addition to VR, one of the speakers, Dr. Tyler Ard, will talk about augmented reality or AR. So you should have also received a little flyer, and this is a demo flyer that you can use with your smartphone to test out the AR demo. So again, we'll have time at the end to do question and answer and kind of go through a lot of that, but feel free to put notes in the chat if you have any questions. And without further ado, I will go ahead and start the videos. All right. All right, so that concludes the talks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed them. I feel like I learned so much in 40 minutes from my colleagues. And it's a lot of information that was condensed into a very little amount of time. So at this point, I think feel free to jump in with any sort of conversation or questions. I know there was one question in the chat that we could start with, which is about sterilization and using VR in clinical settings. So maybe either Skip or Judy, who I know you guys have been using the Clean Box for your VR sterilization, and maybe some other techniques, or if anyone else wants to jump in and talk about what they're using, that'd be great. And feel free to unmute yourselves and have a conversation.
I'll start, and then maybe Skip can jump in a little bit with the clean box. So thanks for raising that question in the chat regarding sterilization. It's always a concern, right, with shared equipment and wanting to be able to protect our participants, our patients in the clinic as much as possible. So we have a full, I mean, it really was increased and improved after, sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. Is anybody else hearing that too?
Yes, I think there's, yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. So, I mean, this has become much more of a concern after COVID now, and we had to enhance our protocol quite a bit. I mean, we always sterilized it and cleaned the parts that we can. Anything that could be taken off, that could be washed with soap and water and hung up, we would do that too. But of course, with VR and HMDs, there's certainly many parts of it that can't be submerged in water. So, we've tried to make it as personalized for each of our participants as possible, and this is really important for us because we have these training visits. So some of our participants come in 3 times a week for 12 weeks. I mean, they're with us a lot and they're exercising. So now we have that additional component of added perspiration and exhalations that we have to think about. So I'll just name a few of our ways that we've tried to improve hygiene, which is that we've personalized them as much as possible with removable, wipeable covers that are made out of leather. And so, as many of the pieces that actually touch the face or touch the head, we have personalized for every single participant. We were fortunate to get extra head straps from HTC for this study. They were supportive of it. In addition, we have just per COVID protocols, we have our ethanol wipes, at least 70% of alcohol. We put in a new filter and air purifier that filters our room based on our room size every hour, and it's just cycling through. And so that's how we've tried to address it. We actually have a paper that is under review right now that talks about running VR studies during the era of COVID and what considerations need to be made. And we have a lot of statistics that we've reported with respect to how many visits we've had, if we've had cases, those who've reported symptoms, how comfortable participants are with our setup, if they feel that it's sufficient, if there's ways that we can improve. So we actually put that into a scientific article, and that's under review now. So that's my response to that. We also do use the clean box. I think Skip is familiar with the clean box a little bit more than we are because we were turned on to it by him. But we use it in our studies, and we just think, well, it's an added layer of protection with UVC, and on top of everything else we're doing, we think that it's worth it if it gives our participants any more protection.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much in the history of VR been kind of negligent on hygiene. And I'll be the first one to admit it myself. We've done demos with VR headsets in the lab and just people, taking the headset off, giving it to the next person, throwing it on. And maybe this is one of the benefits of, if there's any benefit from COVID, a better vigilance to these issues. I don't think there's been widespread problems up to this point, but now where you have a virus that could be potentially deadly, you got to do everything you can. And everything that Judy described is the standard practice that everybody should be doing, with the addition of the ultraviolet light. I mean, I don't know if there's any solid research on the ultraviolet light stuff in the context of COVID, but it's a known process, albeit a bit expensive. I think $1,600, $1,800. But I almost think you got to do that now, if not for anything else, just to minimize liability. And I think probably IRBs are going to be on this in the near future as well. That you're going to have this added thing. It's not going to be 100%, but is anything 100%? And you got to do everything within your capabilities to reduce risk and harm to people. And so this will be the way moving forward. Now, Judy, you had mentioned in the chat, Judy Deutsch, about some of the issues around that. I don't know if you want to jump in some of the concerns you had with the UV sterilization.
I guess this is Judy. I have more questions. We're getting a clean box. We're going to use a clean box, but then we're reading in all the HTC Vive literature that it can damage some of the sensing capabilities of the device. So now we're not sure we want to get a clean box. So it's just confusing, and I agree that we want to do everything we can to protect our participants. But that's confusing, and so I'm not quite sure what to do about the clean box given the new information. So
maybe there's a study to be done, you know, put a HTC headset in the clean box and run it through 100 cycles and see if there's any, you know, problems that arise. I mean, I just don't know of any data on the damn thing, you know, and just out of safety and liability, all the VAs that have our Brave Mind stuff now, they're getting clean boxes. It's just part of the standard protocol. And it may mess with some of these things down the road, but you know, a $400 or $500 headset versus, you know, killing somebody, you know, maybe the cost benefit is there to look at headsets at these price points as kind of disposable after, you know, 150 uses or whatever. It's something we need to study though.
Thank you.
Just going to add in here, there's also, I think, the opportunity for, you know, design to actually create headsets that can be disassembled and disinfected. Even we don't necessarily have to just think about what exists currently, but we can also maybe push the industry for what we would like to see in the future, given that medical applications of VR are just becoming so much more prevalent. So I think we should think about that problem at, you know, different time scales and try to affect change if we can.
Yeah, I agree with James. That's been on my mind for many years, because we never thought that you know, VR would become something that was used in this way, right? In terms of like lines of people at sweaty trade shows. And so I think that's a really big issue. I have not put on a communal headset on my, you know, head because I'm immunocompromised since the popularization of VR, because the stuff that we had in my lab was cave-based, and we cleaned the crystal eyes, you know, all the time. So it was a little bit different, and we didn't have like high traffic. So at most, maybe once a year, we would have an event with 150 people. But most of the time it was between us, and we had all of our germs were shared anyway because we used all the same keyboards in the lab. You know, it's already disgusting when you're in a lab with all these computer people, right? We're all gross. So people know who've lived through this, right? But now we have these devices that come at different price points, and we have, you know, themed entertainment industry is also facing the same issue, because they can't ask the public to just, you know, bring your own headset. You know, people are showing up at these places in droves, not right now, but hopefully eventually. And for clinical use, which is really the biggest, most amazing opportunity in VR, it always has been, we need an industrial design solution and materials engineering innovation. And that's something that we don't really think about, whether that is something that you know, manufactured with that is resistant, or something that you can spray the stuff with, or like disposable cases, like a case for your case, just like people made cases for you not to drop your phone and ruin it. Maybe there's like a sterile case for different headsets, right? There's always solutions for these things. But I think there's a thought that the market is not there. Well, the pandemic has given us a market for every type of mask on the planet. So maybe we can get a solution for this and push and partner with some companies to make it happen, because we are really desperate for it.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point and a great discussion, because I think we all have suffered through the sweaty headset that we just saw somebody take off their head. At this point, because we are coming up on 3, I'm sure there's a lot more rich conversations. So I think all of the speakers can stay on, and anyone else who wants to stay on is welcome to chat, and we'll be on here for a little bit. But if you do have to go, I just wanted to let you know, I put the link to our event site in the chat, and there's also a link from there to the YouTube playlist that's 360. If you haven't used it before, or if you haven't used a VR cardboard, you basically go to YouTube on your phone and look up USC Smart VR. And we have a playlist called USC Smart VR Community Playlist. and you can just start playing those videos. And when you do, the 360 videos will have a little, I don't know if you can see it, a little VR icon on them, and you can tap that VR icon and it will convert the thing into like a 360. So you want to line up this line with the notch in your headset in order to view the experiences as 360 ones. So hopefully that's straightforward. And if not, we'll be on here so we can answer questions that you might have about that. Okay. And I think Vangelis put a link in the chat. That is maybe a new, more sterile headset. Vangelis, do you want to say anything about it?
Genic headset.
We don't want it to breathe, so I guess, you know.
No, it's a good idea. They're using it at LB, and there's a mask that is fully sanitizable and has magnets, so you attach the headset, and you take it out. You wash the mask 100%. You know, so it's a good solution. Thanks, Maria, for reminding me that.
I have a question for some of the other speakers. What's the average length of a project? And at what point, how long does it take to get to what you feel is a complete project? And or I think this is to Stacy Shevins-Nemec's point in the chat also, before it becomes clinically deployable. I mean, I think we're all at different stages of that. Maybe Skip and Mariantina might have the most experience in terms of what the average project length is, but
10 years. If not at USC, possibly 5. To be honest, but yeah, thanks, Skip.
I think to get it right, you're talking in years, because you got idea phase, you got find the money phase, you got the initial user testing, development phase, and you got the clinical trial phase. Bench to bedside. What is NIH estimated to be? 15 years or something. I'm hoping that it gets faster. I know BraveMind, we actually got that going in less than 2 years into a clinical test, but it wasn't that evolved. We went into the clinical testing knowing that we're going to learn a hell of a lot that would feed into the next generation of development, which ended up getting funded about maybe 3-4 years later. And it just really depends. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff you can bang out pretty quick, and maybe and reduce that time frame into a year, and it just really depends on what the application is. And there's a lot of content out there already too that can be recycled or minimize development costs and speed up stuff to make your life a little easier too.
The hard thing is that stuff also ages quickly, so it has a life cycle, right? It has like maybe a 3-year life cycle, and then you need to port it over to something new, either hardware or software. The things need maintenance, and there is no pipeline to handle all of these things. But I do think that it's easy to create sort of local scalable solutions. That's why I think what we're trying to do at USC with our dream on hold, right? The little clinic that we're waiting for has a lot of potential, because really the biggest barrier is all the crossing of the expertise. And if we can have all the people and develop in a transdisciplinary, way, it is much faster to get stuff done and to validate something, and then hopefully maybe hand it off to someone to do the maintenance and porting and big pizzazz, etc., right? The tech transfer like it's supposed to happen.
Yeah, I think another major factor that we've tried to consider in our work is really thinking about that step and who's going to be using the system. I think when we're doing development in the context of academia, we have several sort of objectives that we're trying to achieve, right? We want to do science and publish papers, but we would also like to develop tools that are actually clinically useful. And sometimes we don't think about those two things at the same time. And I think so for those of us whose training is more on the side of science, we may not have the expertise to understand what's going to make, even if it's a scientifically viable idea, to make it a clinically or commercially viable product. And I think if you think about, if you wait until the back end to consider those things, then you're too late, oftentimes. And so trying to strike that balance, I think, is a real challenge, particularly if you are, on some sort of clock related to your job, right? You have to make choices as to what is the most, the best use of your time at that point in your career. So lots of factors to kind of juggle in making these decisions.
It is sort of faster for the next cycle. It's like I've been literally stalking Skip's research for 20 years, which helped me go into the work that I wanted to go to. And then I've passed it off to as many people as possible. And so like every new project is a little bit faster. It's Gillis and I worked on for how many years on Skyfair, and then, moved all that knowledge into the work with James's lab. That was much easier than us starting from scratch. So it's just passing it quicker to more teams, kind of like COVID, but for good, would be really, we just transfer that model for actual research.
A viral model of knowledge transmission.
Yeah.
That's a Nature paper, Lee.
Yeah.
Primarily, it's about breaking the rules strategically.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think that's great. That's great to know. And maybe it's something that the Smart VR Center can try to support a little more in the future. I think even 2 years ago when we started the center, a lot of our projects weren't at the stage where they were getting ready to be deployed clinically or tested clinically. We were still in the development and feasibility. And now that more projects are, and if anybody else on this meeting or in our center has projects that are getting ready to be at that stage where they should be deployed clinically, maybe those are a good time to start conversations between industry and academia. If you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, we used to use the term disability independent when we would talk about developing an application that, you got to target TBI or stroke or Parkinson's to get the money, but you always have in the back of your mind, how is what I'm building now going to be translatable to different clinical populations? And like, what you saw with the clinical interfaces, different ways of modifying the stimuli so that it has relevance for different populations. So, I remember when we first built this virtual classroom for assessing ADHD, it was really attention process assessment. It wasn't about ADHD. That was just the diagnosis of the week that was money was getting thrown at. So we were able to build that, but then, with some quick cosmetic changes, we translated it into an office and had some of the same kind of content that we used with TBI, and did a study with a group at Kessler. And so always trying to think about how you can build in on the front end ways to change up the stimuli or the content a little bit and brand new application.
Yeah, the tragedy is that the funding gets distributed by diagnosis instead of domains, right? And so it's frustrating to like write it, market it, and do all this. And I think that we're good at doing that, but it takes time, and it also sort of doesn't make you really think about it in a very holistic way, because a lot of the funding really is about lobbying and activism, and also what's the problem the decade du jour, the last 3 years, right, that is receiving a lot of attention and funding. But a lot of the stuff that, let's say, is done for work in autism could work in Parkinson's, and things that are used in stroke, could be used in spinal cord injury. I mean, but we don't think of it as, you know, group. And when you treat people in the clinic, like they come in with, the flow is like all sorts of different people too, right? So the pragmatic natural model of clinical care is also not diagnosis specific. It's not like you have a room that you put people for different things in general. So it is kind of still very siloed, and that makes development problematic at times.
Are there any other questions? If you're shy, you can put them in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute and just speak up. I think we're a pretty friendly bunch.
I'd like to ask a question about the equipment you're using. Is it basically consumer grade level equipment?
Is that for a specific project or in general for
Or,
all of our VR
yeah,
headsets?
yes, the VR headset technology.
Yeah, I think most of us are using consumer grade. Like we use an Oculus. I think it's a
Okay.
CV1. James, I think you guys use a 5.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, we use a Vive. We've used the early Oculus Rift in the past. Excuse me. But at the time when we started development, these are sort of systems that were a few $100s. So, and which I think was really great because it increases the likelihood that this could be something that could maybe translate clinically. But as other people have already highlighted, the systems turn over quickly in terms of each year each company has sort of a new headset and something is slightly different.
Right.
But yeah, commercially available.
Thank you. Interesting.
Anybody have any ideas on how soon standalone headsets will have the same level of processing power of a PC delivered headset? Maybe Vangelis, if you're out there, you can weigh in. Because I think standalones are going to be the way to go. Headsets are going to be receivers of 5G streamed content, no more computers. But you've got limitations in the graphic horsepower.
You
with
do,
that.
but there are a lot of solutions out there, even streaming the headsets, not just locally, but through 5G and all that. So everything is tied to the future of rendering in general. And there's so many things that right now are changing because there's so much demand for rendering. Just even look at the stock market, how AMD in 5 years became a colossal company in rendering, because the estimate is like every device in the near future will have to have rendering power, rendering at the cloud, and servicing devices from that architecture is being considered heavily at the industry. And if you look at it, everything comes down to design. Do you know how to design in an optimized way for all-in-one mobile devices? If you do, there's enough juice there to make sure that, even if you see the new Oculus Quest, it has enough rendering power to not even feel the difference between playing the same games on a high-end computer versus the mobile. It's all down to experts offering the expertise in the domain that we're talking about. But other than that, I think we'll see massive improvement in rendering in the next couple of years in mobile, because that's the paradigm that attracted more traction in VR and XR. There are rumors that Apple even is working on a VR headset, and apparently it has twice the power of the chip that right now it's the state of the art when it comes to rendering. So I don't think rendering is the real problem. Most of the problem, and what I was trying to compensate by having this class at the school, is design and know-how. How you are developing these applications, what you have to consider for young students to really get the head around the sense of presence, agency, interactivity, and mindfully design for these immersive platforms, whether it's mixed reality in a HoloLens or VR as we know it.
I mean, the ideal production pipeline in the future would be that we do rapid prototyping R&D in a transdisciplinary way at the university and put out design brief and spec for people to build, different sorts of applications that could be commercialized, and whoever gets to the market first, because doing production at the university is death. Managing like game production. No one, like not even the game faculty, want to do that for experimental work, because already at a game studio, that's very expensive and time-consuming endeavor that requires you 100% to project manage that. In academics, we're like 100% fragmented in our attention, so we can't really do a good job at managing these sort of things, and we really shouldn't. We should be producing crazy amount of problems for the industry to like steal, solve, replicate, and put into the market, because they have a different timeline. So like I loved what we did for Wordplay in that we had experimented so much that we had this design brief, and really it was the students that built it, right? Not without guidance, but and it's of course they did a lot of hard work too, but we had done the hard work of telling them what problems we needed to be solved and how, like, what constraints they needed, and they've found a creative solution for it. Like, I want to put out design briefs. I don't want to be doing production work. I'm at a university for a different reason. If I wanted production work, I'd be working in a production company, and that's nothing wrong with that, but it's not where my heart is right now.
I couldn't agree more, Mariantina. And also that's my advice in big and established companies in the field, even, that strong design and R&D, and then outsource production. Because that, exactly as you say, you can managing productions. It's a very specialized task that you shouldn't have the burden on it.
I had a project that with a big foundation, I can't name, to build an app for me. And the way they did it is that I provided them the design spec and the shepherding, and they put it to bid for a number of companies to build me this app. And they problem solved what I needed in different ways. And I just like picked a rationale and an aesthetic for the design and a UX, and then went with them and they just kind of did it for me. So that was like amazing to have, 5 to 8 different options for people to solve the problem that I already, knew roughly how I needed it solved.
Is that something that you feel like we could provide as a center service, or fill in some parts of this pipeline so that people that are creating can help facilitate? I've never heard of a design brief or in the bid process. So I feel like that whole process, from the academic side, when we're just doing research, we don't know that much.
Yeah, I mean, making design briefs is what someone, at career kind of often does for a good amount of money. So I don't know. It takes so much education to tell people what it is for them to ask for the service. It's just like having a statistics core, right? When someone shows up at your doorstep at the stats core and you're trying to figure out what happens there, it's very complicated, because you have to know what you're asking for or be willing to handhold someone from A to Z. So that's a very long relationship, because it's not like seeing a therapist once, it's a very long-term commitment. But I do think that if we had relationships with companies that were not just production, but they understood the handoff between clinical R&D into production for healthcare, right? That would really help. It's like, whoever's available, please, could you give me a bid for this? Like, that would be amazing.
And the good news, is that they're establishing platforms right now for drag and drop rapid prototyping, inside headsets, both in mixed reality and VR. Low code, no code becomes the norm. So if you know the value of rapid prototyping and you can capture the process and distill it in the design document, that will be extremely efficient for academia to derive to conclusions of what works, what doesn't, and why, objectify in a design brief, and then produce it at high level that is, scalable or product ready. It's just connecting the dots, but the services are out there, and everyone is aligned into offering novel ways that work using the exact technology, especially in health and care.
And then, in the collaboration, when you're trying to come up with a design brief, like to have people at the same level where you have someone with the science expertise, the clinical expertise, the design, all like at a senior level, and you don't have to worry about, saving money to pay students to do this stuff. Really, we're relieved being able to buy so much art, instead of like having someone dedicate themselves to make the 3D art, so we can rapidly put together a lot of these experimental environments. But if you're doing something that's aesthetically driven, you could at least work with a higher level art director, and take a little bit of their time to figure out what you want, and then put that in the brief, right? And a good systems engineer, right? And a good UX designer, but not, think about staffing an entire team throughout the entire duration of your grants to make it happen. It's painful, very painful way to run projects.
I mean, I think what we're doing right now is like brainstorming the next iteration of what the Smart VR Center can be and provide now that we've brought people together and gotten to see the scope. I know that some people may have to go and we can still stay on, but at this point, I think I'll also mention that what we have slated next is actually a bunch of invited talks from people in industry. So those we're trying to figure out if it's best to do them one-offs, like single meetings, or if we can put a few together like this showcase. But companies in this space that are doing really interesting things. And I think these are great questions to keep in mind now that we have some sense of the research side of this process. How are they moving things forward clinically? And especially like Vangelis mentioned, moving them so rapidly forwardly. So I think that's something too. I also want to note that we are going to also contribute or have a video in the works on how to make your own 360 videos. So on our playlist, you'll find our like demos of some of our projects. But if you would like to be featured or you'd like to share some of the work that you or your team are doing, we just basically view this as a forum to hear from other people and get to know what other members in the community are doing. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. Yeah, okay. That note, I mean, we can stay on and continue this conversation about the future. I think James sent a message that this becomes a great paper to move forward with, position paper. I think it's rare that we have so many people in one place that are working on these projects, somewhat in parallel, but also there's a lot of room to overlap. So,
those interviews I sent you, I'm going to need this recording so that I can extract more of it for our Rehabilitation Futures project.
That's it. And actually, we'll be putting this recording on YouTube as well. So that same playlist link will have the 360 videos, and then it'll also have our regular old 2D videos of our talks and of this discussion, so we can return to it because I feel like it was a really rich one. Yeah, great.
Thanks
Maybe,
for leading, Lee.
What? What?
I just said thanks for leading, Lee. I'm going to head out. I have a meeting.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right. Thanks,
I
everyone.
wondered if any of the audience might have any recommendations for us as to how this center can evolve and provide more service. Any ideas out there?
People are just running away from that question.
I think we're just leaders here. We got a couple.
Oh, a startup incubator. That's from Catherine Eunice. Yeah, I think, I think there's a lot of potential right now, especially because the university is focusing on these cross-disciplinary collaborations, and we have talked about trying to do something between academia and industry and form these pipelines. So I think it sounds like the time is getting ready for that.
The university has two committees put together to kind of change how they've been handling innovation, but also IT. So hopefully that will improve how we've done it in the past.
I agree.
My name is Malcolm. I'm a second year
Malcolm.
PhD student in the biokinesiology department. I think it was really beneficial to hear like the gaps or the things that you guys haven't solved yet. I'm doing literature reviews for like things, but to know what real time what you haven't you experts in the field haven't solved yet, it's really helpful in directing what our research should be. So I think hearing you guys not know things is so helpful.
Thanks for sharing that. That's a great feedback too. You're right. I think by the time a paper gets published, it's a year old and the rapid pace of tech changes every 3 months or so. So thanks, Malcolm. I think we have a comment from Catherine who has a question. Oh, how does, Catherine, are you on the call? Do you want to just say it?
Yeah, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, so I have a question about equipment just for, I'm not very familiar with VR. I don't know a lot about the technologies. And honestly, a lot of the talk, even now, and from hearing from other people, has been intimidating as to kind of the amount of expertise needed to program in it. So just as someone starting out with this, are there medical contexts that I would not have to, like I could get started without having to program a whole Oculus? Or is the Oculus kind of like the basic starting platform right now for medical applications in VR? Yeah.
I would
I like
say
the timing.
Well, I'll just
Let's
say
go
real
on.
quick, cardboards are not medical devices. I mean, they're nice to have at home and maybe for some home-based stuff, if it's well done, but you don't have, there's a lot of things about, having a fixed lens that make it so it's not adaptable for everybody. You don't want to cause eye strain in some folks where it's just not set right. And, it's a fun thing, but I think your entry level thing should be like, say, a Quest or a Pico Neo and above, for a real medical type thing. I mean, yeah, maybe you do something at an AA group with cardboards and everybody has their cardboard and they do a relapse prevention thing or something in there. I don't know. That's fun and it's great. But in a medical setting, I think you need something a little more sturdy, a little bit more adjustable to the user's entry level, physical level, and so on. Bingo.
No, from my perspective, what I wanted to say is like you have to find your role within a team. It's not that there is a shortcut for you to start developing in Oculus right away. The best thing is to get a headset, get experience and exposure of what is out there, what people are doing, and then using your domain expertise, connect with others in order to form teams to investigate what you can do and how what you're interested in. I'd say, talking about media, the complexities of the XR technologies is much higher than the previous generations of media devices. So if we consider film production, for example, very complicated, VR productions are 10x of that and require more experience. So it's team working. It's not a one-man show. Nothing, Valentina, wanted to say something.
So Catherine is a PhD student who does not run like her own lab with a bunch of people. And I think there's a practical limitation that your lab either does this or not, and maybe your PI has made you the point person for something, but you don't know, because our PhD students are so
Yeah.
focused on specializing
Full
that there's
disclosure, I
no.
work with James. So
I know you have some privilege there, but there's realities that you can't spend your entire time like experimenting, because you're like have to be laser focused on doing your experiment, publishing your paper, defending, leaving, going to get your tenure track job and toiling over that, right? So it's hard to be super playful and tinkering with all sorts of devices in your lab if that's not what your lab does, right? If it's not the primary thing. So I would say that depending on the domain that you're working in, there's some kind of headset that works best for the time, and you sort of choose it for how long you think it's going to be alive to give you the data that you need to graduate, and that's what you go for, path of least resistance, because you're not going to marry the headset. That headset is divorcing you like within 3 years probably. So it's a short-term relationship.
Those are all great points. And there's
So-
also, go ahead.
As an example, I posted Enclu. Enclu is a middleware for Unity. It's a cloud service where you can have drag and drop development without writing any code, the existing behaviors and all that for rapid prototyping. And then you can use tablets, you can use VR headsets, you can use mixed reality devices, and invite collaborators in the same way you invite collaborators to do something at a Google Doc. So everyone can play with the application, and automatically, because it's a cloud service, it syncs to all devices. So we're gonna see more and more of these trends where, at least for rapid prototyping, for proving some concepts of what works and what doesn't, it will require low or no code.
That's awesome.
thank you. Just one more question. Does the Smart VR Center have headsets out for rent, or like that can go out?
That's a good question. We don't have a model for that, but we definitely can. I think all of us have headsets that are just sitting around, especially right now, that could be borrowed if interested.
Julie had a question.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine. Julie, did you want to read your question?
Well, I like everything you guys are doing, and I'm wondering what has to happen before we get these kits in our clinic and it's approved by FDA and Medicare and all those agencies.
I can give a very quick response, which is that for some indications, we actually were able to get VR headsets into CAC Hospital to help people who have COVID and are feeling really isolated during COVID. So we just loaded like off-the-shelf content. And when the clinicians use them for insurance purposes, they just use it as part of the treatment. So it's one of the many tools in their toolkit that they can use to deal with addressing mental health issues, anxiety, and social isolation, for instance. And they're built under those normal codes, as opposed to being like a special VR code.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Skip, I don't know if you have a different experience.
No, I see how that would work. I mean, at one time we were using the Wii system, the Nintendo Wii from about 12 years ago. And, we just used the special codes.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
With BraveMind, do you guys do something different, or do they do insurance billing for BraveMind?
No, I mean, there are private practitioners using it, and they bill for trauma treatment or prolonged exposure. It's already an evidence-based approach. All we have is a fancy tool to deliver that evidence-based approach. So, and that's been how it's been with phobia treatment and so on, anxiety disorders. I think the FDA thing and the insurance and all of it, it's all a matter of, are you making claims that are really over the top? Then that's going to attract FDA attention. You're going to be able to back that up. And FDA is really also about getting reimbursed, specifically for Health and Human Services money. So, you know, it really depends what you want to do and where it fits in the whole ecosystem. But I don't think it's a bottleneck. You know, like you know, Cedars is routinely using VR for pain management and for respite for patients. They just had to have their internal groups approve their protocols. You know, like an IRB kind of thing, medical IRB. You know, every app in every population and every use case is going to be a little bit different. But I think you're going to see tons of people putting out all-in-one wellness, or it's already happening, wellness products where you're not claiming you're going to fix anybody. You're just, you know, giving them a tool that might be one part of that puzzle to help them have a more well life. Is that good or bad? I mean, if it keeps somebody getting care they really need to get with a well-trained professional, then that could be problematic. But
there
it's benign.
there is a new law that if you get breakthrough device designation at the FDA and then clearance, you automatically get a reimbursement code for Medicare coverage, which is huge news. It shortens the period needed to go to market by far. And we're going to see more and more trends. There's the new Digital Center for Excellence at the FDA, a unified way of understanding the digital transformation that's happening right now in health and care here in the United States. The FDA last April opened the gates to every digital therapeutic out there that's dealing with mental health under the COVID urgency. So it's a great opportunity for field study for them to see how actually these interventions perform and then regulate what is needed. So we see trends out there that really point out in a digital revolution that is coming, that we don't know exactly how it will settle and what will mean, but will definitely stimulate more and more development in academia, and also a big chunk of that will go to the industry directly.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So Julie, in our lab, we really approach it from a research perspective and science perspective, and we want it to be an evidence-based approach. So what we were able to do with Rescue Ranger VR is to get some early pilot funding from USC and to develop an early version of it. Through that, we detected a signal that we thought was interesting, potentially meaningful for our outcomes of interest. And, you know, this is really living in a clinical trials world. So if you start to see a signal that your intervention or your treatment is modifying something that you care about, like brain health, let's just, you know, making the brain bigger, then that's meaningful, but you need to do a bigger study with more participants to see whether or not there's efficacy for that intervention. And so if that intervention is then deemed to be efficacious, then you could perhaps take that data to the FDA, you know, and there's multiple layers of phase 1 versus phase 2 versus phase 3 clinical trials that have to happen. And then at that point, it could be deemed as a treatment. And if it's FDA approved, then perhaps insurance could be pursued to, you know, Medicare, CMS types of, you know, Center for Medicare types of investigations can be done. And so that's our approach with things, is that we don't want to put things out on the market strictly for entertainment. We want to put them out there where we know that they could be beneficial. And these are the 3 things we could say that it benefits in the brain with respect to what our lab focuses on, which is aging and Alzheimer's disease risk. So that's been our view, but I certainly understand, you know, there's different approaches to it, and this general idea of, you know, wellness or being able to move other desired outcomes. And then I had a comment, but I think she signed off, so I'll let it be. My comment was basically to Catherine, who was talking, you know, she had her question about, well, how do you get started and so forth. And I wanted to express to her and to everybody else that I just think, you know, you think about what the scientific question is, or just what the overall goal or objective is of developing a certain type of intervention focused with healthcare in mind for VR use. And you just want to know what that question is, and then to not over engineer it, right? Not make it more complicated than it needs to be. And there's certainly cases where you want to impact some sort of disease or some sort of process where VR isn't necessary. You know, you can pursue it in a very different way. And we don't necessarily want to jump right into it because maybe we're making it more complicated than we need to be.
Those are great points. Thanks, Julie. And they will be saved in posterity so Catherine can listen to them on the YouTube playlist later. Are there any last comments or thoughts? Otherwise, I know this has gone really long, but I think it's been a really fruitful conversation, hopefully.
I had a like, I guess responding to the question of like ways that the center could support. It's more of a question, thinking as like a student who's trying to create VR programming for intervention. Is there, I know there's like probably proprietary things associated with what you each have created, like rescue rangers, but I think it'd be really useful if there was almost like a starting place to develop like a plug and play, if there was some type of program that was white labeled, that had necessary, like that you didn't have to code for to be able to create some simple interventions. I think that would, starting is the most
Hardest part.
overwhelming thing when you don't have a place in a virtual world and you want to create a virtual program. And I think that also like builds into, if we have a starting place, even, no, is it Dr. Gotsi? Gotsis? Like what you said about this like design brief, I feel like it even would be more, it'd be so simple to go to the Cinematic School of Arts and present a design brief if they had like this place that we already work in as a department. Hey, if we want to start VR, this is where we have, but these are the things I need you to change for this intervention. So that would be huge if that is feasible.
So I think that a lot of things that we really want have to do with having easy dev kits, right, for scientists or APIs, things like that, because most scientists have and clinicians have some capacity for doing technical work. Right now for the students, we are doing something experimental with a competition for the Brains at Play initiative with the Smart VR Center is a co-sponsor. So I've dropped the link down there. And we have a starting workshop to like help people, you know, get to understand how to put together actually a design brief. And there's a competition, and there's brainstorming tools, and there's a brainstorming workshop. There's a short course for high school students. But there is also an API that the lead coordinator for this project, Garrett Flynn, who's a student, has been developing, so that you could actually create an idea on top of existing hardware and software without having to sort of think about it all from scratch. So the concept of APIs and SDKs don't quite exist for what we want, but at least for brain controlled interfaces, we're doing this experiment that is really kind of open right now to all participants to see, what are the strengths and limits of this model.
And I will also say that we just started teaching a course this semester on teaching occupational therapy students about random technologies, and they're very short intro courses, but the goal is to get your hands wet. And I just recorded a lecture on Unity, which is what most people use to program VR environments. And I can share it with you. It's only 30 minutes. But in Unity, actually, they have these new built-in tutorials where they have already set games. So there's like a driving game, there's like a 2D scrolling game, there's like all these environments, and they show you how to just modify those. So you don't actually have to know code, you just follow step by step. They take about half an hour, and it's, I think, a really unintimidating way to get started with Unity and just with the programming. And then they'll show you also a little bit about code. So I'm happy to share those resources too once they're up.
We also have paper prototyping classes at the Cinema School in the games program. So the CTIN 488 class, for example, and some others do not require any programming. They teach people how to paper prototype design concepts so that since you know what your problem is, or to figure out what your problem is, you could put together an actual game design document and play it with, actual paper and props, or, whatever, however you can prototype it kind of quick and dirty to validate your concept. So because programming, every line of code that you write is a liability. And as it accumulates, you're less willing to modify your project because now you have a monster in your hands, whereas a paper prototype is disposable. So you want to know what you want to build before you sit down and noodle with it, ideally. But there's a lot of innovation that happens with just noodling and tinkering too. It's just that you need to be able to do both to solve all your problems.
And I think Tyler also put a great link in the chat that has some, what are these? Sample packs.
Yeah, they're just the getting started. I think something that got skipped over here a lot is I think every one of us is using Unity. So all of our VR projects, I believe, are all Unity-based, which really took over basically the entire back end of VR. But it isn't the no coding. There's some stuff you could do in there without coding, but a lot of it is going to be, there's quite a big ramp up to get in there to do your first things. But they know this. They're a big company and they provide a lot of tutorials, introductions to get your foot in the door to get moving. And you don't need to jump right into the coding, but it's the monster in the corner that there's no real getting around it without, you can expand your team, have other people get to it. And there are those great tools that Vangelis is linking, but those are all kind of pay for it. But the state that we're at now versus waiting for something to come in the future is somebody's going to need to do some programming.
Yeah, I think it's great though. I think I don't know if you're on our Slack, Malcolm, but we try to share some resources and we'll also try to put some links there for like good tutorials. I just went through one that was maybe like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and it includes some of the coding, and you just type what the person on the YouTube tutorial types, but it gets your feet wet and gets you familiar with it. Okay, we're at 3:45, and I think a lot of us have more meetings to go to, so we will stop there if that's okay. But thank you guys so much, and especially to the last remaining people, the last people standing. Thanks for hanging in. It's good to talk to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you.